They say that our universe is actually a multiverse and that we each live parallel lives, making different choices in each reality. These realities do not usually overlap and they are not influenced by any other. But once in a while, the stars collide, and an untimely death in one universe causes an awareness in our iteration in another, which gives us the opportunity to relive our past lives consciously. This may be what happened to me and Jeremy, because we each had an awakening at the same time. We both had a moment, a sudden shift, like remembering a dream you never lived. I remember we were driving down I-285 in Atlanta, traffic crawling even though it was past rush hour. He was yelling and I was staring out the window, tears sliding down without a sound, like always. He once said he loved how respectful I was, how I never talked back no matter what. Truth is, I was just his emotional punching bag. But there was one thing he couldn't forgive, that I couldn't give him children. I thought back to how we met, 2 cubicles apart, in a mid-sized marketing firm in Marietta. We used to hang around with coworkers after hours, and he'd always offer rides to the bus stop when our shifts ended. But one evening, it was just me in his car. He said everyone else was working overtime. Instead of just dropping me off at the station, he took me straight home, right to my parents' place on Piedmont Road. That was the day he asked me to marry him. I knew he liked me. He wasn't shy about it, but I didn't expect a proposal right then. I did like him. He was charming, thoughtful, kind in ways that felt real. So I said yes. We got married a few months later. For a while, things were good. Sunday drives, barbecues with friends. We had a rhythm. But after a year without even a scare, I saw a doctor. Multiple doctors, actually. None of them had a clear answer. Just a string of gynecological issues no one could quite explain. All I knew was pregnancy might never be possible. That's when Jeremy turned. Some days he accused me of lying, of knowing I couldn't have children before we got married and hiding it. Other days he blamed our values, saying if I hadn't insisted on waiting until marriage, we would have known sooner. But we were both raised the same. In a Southern Baptist home where sex before marriage just wasn't on the table. So no, I didn't deceive him. I did the best I could. But that didn't matter to him anymore. I had a good job, but I spent all I earned on doctors and procedures, which left me with little to spend on myself. The result? Failure, with the added disadvantage of losing my looks, all in the mistaken belief that my efforts would win Jeremy's sympathy and his love back. 12 years later, Jeremy was turning 40. We were living just outside of Dallas at the time, and I decided to do something special for him. I booked a private room at a high-end steakhouse in Uptown, one of those places where valet drivers wear earpieces and the lighting is so dim it feels like candlelight even at noon. I invited close friends, family, a few of his coworkers, people he cared about. I didn't do it to show off. I just wanted to make him feel loved, even after everything. I still believed, maybe, somewhere deep down, we could find our way back. But in the middle of the dinner, right between the cocktails and dessert, Jeremy stood up to give a toast and instead dropped a bombshell. He announced to the entire room that he was divorcing me, and then he sat down. He gave his reason, loud enough for our whole table to hear, that I was pushing 40 and nearing menopause, and that he had to move on if he ever wanted a family. I was 35. I could barely breathe. People froze with their forks in midair. The silence was suffocating. When the party ended early, as you can imagine it did, I stood at the door thanking people for coming, trying to smile while choking back tears. I apologized like I had been the one to ruin the evening. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just a scene. This was real. On the drive home, Jeremy, filled with guilt, or maybe just trying to justify what he'd done, went on a rant. "This is your fault, Emma," he said as he gripped the steering wheel too tight. "You're going to act like I'm your first love, but I've asked around. Girls who marry as virgins don't have fertility problems. Dr. Mayberry said that too. You must have had some secret lovers who gave you an infection. You tricked me." I didn't respond. He chose to take my silence as guilt. "You're always quiet when you've been caught. You acted like a saint, like you were so pure, but all you did was trap me in a dead-end life." He paused, glanced at me, looking for a reaction. And when he didn't get one, he got angrier. "I need kids, Emma. sons to carry my name. What's the point of working hard, of investing, of building anything if I have no one to leave it to? I finally spoke softly. Isn't this about Patricia? He snapped his head toward me, eyes wide. Because Jeremy, I'm not a miracle worker. I don't give children. That set him off. He raised his voice, yelling that he was 40, that I was running out of time, that I was as good as living with a man for all the use I was. His hands came off the wheel more than once to gesture while he yelled. Jeremy, watch the road, I said, seeing the red light ahead. But he didn't stop. He kept ranting. I'll find someone younger, someone who still has time to give me sons. Jeremy, the light! I screamed as I saw the 18-wheeler entering the intersection from the left. Its green cab lit up under the streetlight as it tried to brake, but it was too late. The trailer began to jackknife, and I could see the entire shipping container turning, tipping, falling toward us like a slow-motion nightmare. In that last split second, Jeremy finally saw it too. I caught the terror in his eyes, his mouth still open mid-sentence, his voice drowned by screeching tires and metal collapsing in on us. Then, nothing. Silence. And then light. I blinked and realized I was sitting in a car again, parked in front of my parents' old house in Plano, same street, same trees, same mailbox with the chipped red flag. I looked at my hands, felt my face, then turned to Jeremy. He was looking around too, disoriented, breathing heavy like he'd run a marathon. We sat in stunned silence. No crash, no noise, just the hum of the car engine and the distant sound of kids playing down the street. It felt like I had woken up, like life had rewound, like I had been given another shot. At first, I thought it was just a bad dream, but the look in Jeremy's eyes said he had felt it too. Get out, he said suddenly. I turned to look at him, confused. What? He leaned over, pushed the passenger door open roughly. I said, get out. Jeremy, I began, searching his face. Can we at least talk about it? But he wouldn't even look at me. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Marrying you was a mistake, he muttered. I'd be a fool to go through with it now. I sat there, stunned. All the love I had for him, everything I had given, the effort, the sacrifice, the years, all of it felt like it had meant nothing. I stepped out of the car slowly and watched him pull away, tires screeching slightly as he disappeared down the quiet residential street. When I walked into the house, my mom was at the kitchen island, prepping dinner, cutting red onions and green bell peppers, the smell of garlic already in the air. You're home early, she said without looking up. Yeah, Jeremy dropped me off. Alone? She raised an eyebrow, pausing her chopping. Yeah, it was just me today. She tilted her head slightly. Did he say anything to you? I knew what she was hoping for. She had told me in another life that he'd stop by that day to ask for my hand in marriage. No, I said, more curtly than I meant to. My chest still ached, and the last thing I needed was a conda. She didn't like my tone, and she let me know. Well, she snapped, turning her attention back to the cutting board. Since you're home early, you can help around here. Don't think just because you've got a desk job now that your sister and I are your maids. She went on, criticizing as I put my purse down and rolled up my sleeves, still in my work clothes, and silently started helping. That was just how things were in our house. My mom and dad weren't bad people. They were just hard people, tough, traditional. Emotion wasn't their language. But I had been raised to take things quietly, to be the peacekeeper, to be agreeable, and that's how Jeremy had learned to walk all over me. I had never learned to speak up. So when I finally did, my voice surprised even me. I'm moving out. She froze. What did you say? I'm moving out, Mom. I didn't stop there. I've been looking at apartments. One of the girls at work and I are thinking of splitting a 2-bedroom near the office. Nothing fancy. She didn't respond. Not that night, not the next. But on the day I packed my last bag into a rental SUV and started closing the door, she pulled me into a hug. Tight. Tighter than I expected. She whispered in my ear, I don't know what's going on with you, but something has really hurt you. Be safe, and you can always come home, okay? I nodded, but I couldn't explain what I was feeling, because even I didn't fully understand it. In this life, Jeremy and I weren't even engaged yet. Technically, nothing had happened. But in my heart, I had already lived 12 years with him. I had loved him. I had given everything, and I had watched him slowly stop loving me back. Now here I was, back at the beginning, and I knew what lay ahead. I knew the heartbreak, I knew the fights, I knew the coldness and the cruel words. And even though we hadn't started dating yet, I could feel it. It was already over. So I left my home, my job, and the version of life I'd always thought I wanted to try something different, something new. In this life, I would make different choices. 3 years later, I was living in a two-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake, sharing rent with Angela, a friend from my old job at the firm. She still worked there and often filled me in on old office gossip, especially about Jeremy. Of course, she had no idea about our past or that in another life I had been his wife. About a year after our reawakening, Jeremy had married Patricia, a woman who'd transferred to our LA branch from the company's London office just months before the accident. I remembered her clearly. In our former life, she'd suddenly quit and vanished after getting pregnant, with whispers that Jeremy was the father. I had ignored the rumors back then, willfully blind, clinging to loyalty even when my gut screamed otherwise. Now, seeing that he had married her in this life only confirmed what I had refused to believe before, that she had always been the one, that the betrayal had always been real. But I let it go. In this timeline, Jeremy hadn't hurt me, and I was building something new. I'd started over, fresh job, new routine. I was working as the executive assistant to the CEO of a small but ambitious startup in downtown LA. Healing. I was only 26, but the wisdom I carried from my previous life gave me an edge. I could sense industry trends before they hit, and I had a way of anticipating national shifts that impressed even our board. 2 years later, the founder, Mr. Ferry, decided to retire and pass the baton to his son, Leon. Leon wasn't classically handsome, but he had something magnetic about him. Tall, sharp, always dressed to the nines. He spoke with quiet authority, and when he walked into a room, people noticed. I wouldn't call it love at first sight, but it was close. Still, I had made a decision long ago. I wasn't going to get married. I'd lived the heartbreak. I'd felt the loss. I knew the cost of infertility. I didn't want to do that again. Mr. Ferry introduced me to his son on his first day and told him I was staying on as his assistant. Leon wasn't thrilled. "I want to build my own team," he said bluntly. "I already have someone in mind for this position." But his father cut him off. "Son, listen, I've avoided multi-million-dollar losses and made some of my best deals because of this woman. She's not just a secretary. She's our secret weapon. If she ever leaves, it'll cost us more than you know." I was standing right there while they talked about me like I wasn't in the room, so I smiled and said, "Mr. Ferry, I would never betray this company. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and I don't take that for granted." Leon looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted in his eyes. He kept me on, begrudgingly, on a trial basis. 9 months later, he proposed. "I love you, Emma," he said one night after a late work dinner. "You're my lucky charm. You're everything I've been looking for. Smart, kind, grounded. Please say yes." I was tempted, but I had to be honest. "I love you too, Leon," I said. "But I've made up my mind not to marry. I have some medical complications. It's complicated." He didn't back off. "Tell me what it is. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out, together." So I told him everything, about the infertility, about my history, about why I had sworn off love. He took my hands in his. "I don't want kids from you. I want kids with you. And if that means adopting, we'll adopt, even from day one. I'm adopted myself, Emma. My dad married my mom when I was still a baby. His biological son passed away years ago, but I've never once felt like anything less than his own blood. Legacy isn't about DNA. It's about love." I could have cried. It was like someone handed me water after years in a desert. 6 months later, we got married in a small ceremony overlooking the Pacific. Just a few close friends, some family, and no drama. True to his word, Leon started the adoption process right after our honeymoon. But the system was slow and full of setbacks. A year passed, and we were still on a waiting list. Then one day, I realized I had missed my period. I didn't think much of it. Stress, probably. But when I missed the next one, I booked a blood test at Medview Hospital. I couldn't bear the heartbreak of a home test again. That evening, my phone rang. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Leon Ferry?" "Yes, speaking. I'm calling from Medview. You came in for a pregnancy test this morning. Just wanted to let you know it's positive. You're pregnant." I was in complete shock. 9 months later, I gave birth to healthy twins, a boy and a girl. But the delivery was difficult, and the doctors had to perform a hysterectomy. I was grateful for my babies, but I knew that chapter of my life had ended. 2 years later, the adoption finally came through. A sweet baby boy, just under a year old. We named him Leon Jr., and just like that, our family was complete. It's been 30 years since I woke up in that other life. My twins are 27 now, and Leon Jr. is 25. They're grown, thriving, and each has their own voice. So I'll let Leon Jr. tell this next part.
Hi, I'm Leon, named after my dad. I found out I was adopted back in high school during a biology project. It never really fazed me. My parents had always told me that they started the adoption process even before my siblings, the twins, were born. I've always been part of the family in every sense of the word. My mom used to say, "The twins were given to me, but you're the child I chose." That stuck with me. I've never felt like I didn't belong aside from the fact that I look a little different. I've never seen myself as anything but their son. But after I graduated from college, I did start to notice one difference. I'm a lot more competitive than the rest of my family. So, when my dad offered me a role in the family business, I turned it down. It wasn't about not appreciating the offer, I just wanted to carve my own path. The business was thriving, but not quite big enough to comfortably support all of us. My sister had moved to another state with her husband and still received a share of the profits. My brother was already working alongside our parents, and they had a great rhythm. I didn't want to throw off that balance. Plus, I wanted to challenge myself. I had good grades and a solid resume, so landing a job wasn't too hard. I ended up joining a company called Rebirth Incorporated, totally different industry, much larger scale. It felt like the perfect place to test my limits and see how far I could go. On my first day, I headed straight to HR to pick up my ID badge and finalize my onboarding paperwork. When I stepped into the office, there were 3 people inside. 2 women sat at their desks. One of them was one of the most stunning women I'd ever seen. Her jet black hair was swept elegantly over one side of her face. Her eyes were deep and intense, the kind that make you feel like they're looking right through you. And the way her dress hugged her figure, it was like it was made just for her. The third person in the room was a tall, good-looking guy, leaning on the edge of her desk, whispering something that made her laugh softly. The moment I walked in, he shot me a cold, territorial look, clearly not thrilled that someone else had entered the room, especially someone he might see as competition. I could tell I had interrupted his moment, and my presence didn't help. I'm a tall guy too, and years of lifting at the gym had definitely shaped my build. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, and I knew I made an impression. But I ignored him. Instead, I walked over to the other lady, who greeted me with a warm, professional smile, despite the annoyed glances she was throwing at the couple. "New hire?" she asked, giving me a once-over with an approving smile. "Can I see your offer letter?" I set my briefcase down on her desk and popped it open. That's when the stunning woman at the other desk chimed in. "A briefcase? Seriously? How old are you?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. I smiled back. "Yeah, I guess I'm a little old school. It was a graduation gift from my dad." The tall guy, still leaning casually on her desk, made a pointed comment clearly meant for me, though he wasn't looking directly at me. Some people love to show off, not realizing how ridiculous they look. But don't worry, we know how to put folks like that in their place. His mockery caught me off guard. I turned and noticed the way the woman was watching me like I was the main course at a steakhouse. That explained his hostility. Even though my ego appreciated the attention, I felt a little put off by both of them. The guy had to be at least 5 years older than me, and yet here he was, acting like an insecure teenager. And the woman? Well, she clearly enjoyed stirring up the tension. The whole scene felt immature and unnecessary. I turned my focus back to the paperwork, grabbing my ID, signing NDAs, and filling out forms, doing my best to tune them out while they continued their flirty whispers and giggles. The lady processing me kept rolling her eyes at their antics. I gave her a sympathetic smile, wondering why she didn't just tell them to cut it out. But I got my answer when, as I finished up and thanked her, the other woman spoke to me again. She leaned forward over her desk very much on purpose and said, "I'm Cassidy. If you ever run into any trouble, don't hesitate to come to me." Before I could respond, the guy jumped in. "Why would he come to you?" What kind of trouble is he gonna have? He stood up, hands casually in his pockets. I'm the owner's son. If you've got a problem, I'm the one who can fix it. What department are you in? Ah, so that explained the ego. But I wasn't fazed. My dad owns a company too, not as big, but successful enough. I knew better than to be intimidated by a name. Sales, I said simply, and I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Perfect. We'll be working closely then. I head up that department. He stood there for a beat, sizing me up like he was waiting for me to flinch or kiss up. I held his gaze and said, calm and steady. Nice to meet you. I hope we'll work well together. He didn't like that. I could tell. He waved me off dismissively and turned right back to resume his spot on Cassidy's desk. 6 months later, Tom, that was his name, was moved to head another department. Honestly, I was relieved. Working under him had been a nightmare. He was lazy, not particularly bright, and had a talent for taking credit for other people's work while dodging blame whenever things went wrong. During his time as manager, every successful deal somehow had his name on it, even if he barely lifted a finger. It left the team demoralized, and performance across the board suffered. Once Tom was gone, the new manager quickly realized that the team was full of strong, capable people. He was especially impressed with me, since despite being one of the newest hires, I was already familiar with the industry thanks to the time I'd spent helping out at my dad's company every school break. Unfortunately, my path seemed to be cursed with Tom's shadow. Less than a year later, I was transferred to his new department and had to endure his poor leadership all over again. But after my position was made permanent, I made a strategic move. I requested to be transferred elsewhere. My plan was to rotate through as many departments as possible so I could learn the business inside and out. Maybe someday, I'd start my own company to compete with Rebirth. Turns out, fate wasn't done throwing Tom my way. Over the years, I ended up working under him multiple times. Even when I eventually became a department head myself, there were moments when he, now a director, was placed above me in the org chart. 10 years into my career, after a lot of hard work and proving myself, I was finally promoted to director too. That's when I seriously started planning my exit, looking into starting my own firm. I felt ready. But Tom caught wind of it. True to form, he ran straight to the CEO, his father, and raised concerns about my loyalty. I had only met the CEO a handful of times. He was in his early 70s, though he looked much older. His shoulders always seemed slumped, and his face wore a permanent look of weariness. Most employees knew or at least heard rumors about why he seemed so weighed down by life. Apparently, he had married young and had 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter, before his wife left him for someone richer. Though he'd fought for and won custody, he never really found anyone else to help raise them. 2 more marriages ended in divorce. His first son died in a tragic accident while still in high school. That left Tom, the second son, and a daughter who was said to be around my age. From what I'd heard, she had no interest in the family business and wasn't particularly bright either. When I got called into the CEO's office, he looked more worn down than usual. He sat alone behind a large modern white desk, but his presence didn't match the grandeur of the space. He looked small, even fragile, like someone who had lost too much and didn't have the energy to fight anymore. "Leon," the CEO said as I stepped into his office. "Take a seat." I sat down without saying a word. "I've been told you're planning to leave the company, maybe even start your own?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I've been here 10 years. I've learned a lot, and I'm grateful for the experience. But I've never really seen myself as a lifelong employee. I've always wanted to run my own business." "So you're planning to compete with Rebirth? That's disloyal." Ungrateful, he tried to sound outraged, but it came out as a weak cough that turned into a fit. Watching him, I felt more pity than fear. When he finally stopped coughing, he dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief and gave a short, bitter laugh. He shook his head slowly. "I'm an old man," he said. "And it's been a long, difficult life. I thought things would turn out differently. Despite all I've built, I feel like I've ended up with nothing." "Sir," I said, trying to offer some encouragement, "you've built a successful company. You could still live another 20 years. There's no reason to give up hope." But he didn't seem to hear me. "I used to be just like you, ambitious, full of big dreams. I made bold moves to make them happen. For a while, I thought I'd succeeded. But now, all I have left is a fool for a son and a daughter who couldn't care less about the company. What's going to happen to Rebirth when I'm gone? Do you really think Tom can run this place? I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My face probably gave him the answer he was expecting. Tom wants me to fire you because you're planning to leave, he continued. Idiot. If you're leaving anyway, why make you an enemy? You know this company inside and out. It's smarter to let you go on good terms to make you a friendly competitor, not a threat. Truth is, I've been watching your career since the day you walked in. At first, it was just to keep an eye on my son. But over time, you became someone I genuinely respected. I stayed quiet. So did he for a moment. Then he looked straight at me and said, Leon, marry my daughter Abigail. I nearly choked. Excuse me, sir? Why not? If you marry her, I'll hand the company over to you. Tom's useless, and if I give him control, he'll burn it to the ground. Abigail doesn't care enough to run it. She's not even trying to find a husband. But if you're part of the family, at least I'll know the company's future is secure and in good hands. My grandchildren would inherit it, and even if my name doesn't carry on, my work will. He leaned back in his chair, clearly exhausted. Tom can stay on the board as a silent partner. I'd cut him off entirely, but he has a child with a less than reputable woman, and now he's gotten the woman from HR pregnant too. He's planning to marry her. She'll destroy him, but I can't stop him. He's nearly 40. He sighed deeply. Take the rest of the day and think about it. You'd be doing an old man a favor. He turned away and closed his eyes. That was my cue to leave. I walked out stunned. The offer was still ringing in my ears. I couldn't deny that taking over Rebirth would be way easier than building something from scratch. It was tempting, very tempting. But Abigail. She was the problem. Everything I'd heard painted her as quiet, maybe even dull. I wasn't sure I could build a life with someone I didn't love. My parents had the kind of marriage most people dream about, 40 years strong and still deeply in love. That's what I wanted too. I tried searching for information about Abigail, online, photos, articles, anything. But there was nothing. She lived completely under the radar. The next morning, I went for my usual jog. When I got back, I was starving. I'd barely been home for 5 minutes when the doorbell rang. Still shirtless and sweaty, I rushed to answer. It was probably my food delivery, and I didn't want them leaving it on the ground or taking it back. But it wasn't food. A woman stood there, looking irritated and tired. Her brown eyes were sharp and cold. She was dressed simply but with effortless elegance. Leggings, a long flowing blouse that hit just above her knees, pearled wrap earrings, and a perfect bob haircut. I couldn't even tell if she was wearing makeup. Her skin looked smooth and flawless, like porcelain. She was stunning. At her feet was a covered basket. Hello, she said, trying her best to sound polite and flashing me a clearly forced smile. My name is Abigail Tanner. May I come in? It took me a second, but I finally found my voice and stepped back to let her in. My father asked me to spend the morning with you. I couldn't say no, so I'm here to make you brunch. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I promise I'll leave once I'm done cooking. Her voice was low, calm, and oddly musical, like speaking to me was a favor she was reluctantly granting. She glanced around the living room, then turned her gaze back to me, and suddenly I felt weirdly self-conscious. I was usually the confident one around women, the one who showed off. But now? I wanted to hide. I awkwardly crossed my arms over my chest. Let me throw on a shirt, I mumbled. Yes, please? But maybe take a shower too? I see you just got back from a jog, she added, politely but honestly. She could have just said, you stink, and she wouldn't have been wrong. 20 minutes later, freshly showered and a little more composed, I walked into the kitchen. The smell that greeted me was something my apartment had never experienced. Something amazing. Abigail sat on a bar stool at the kitchen island, flipping through one of the cookbooks I kept purely for decoration. A pot simmered gently on the stove. I thought we'd cook together, I said. No need. The faster we finish, the faster this can be over, she replied without even looking up. Her bluntness irritated me. It wasn't her place to just take over my kitchen like this. Actually, I already ordered food. It arrived, she interrupted, pointing at the takeout bag on the counter. I'm incorporating it into the meal. I didn't know what to say. I felt ambushed. I hadn't even given the CEO an answer yet, so why was Abigail already here? Was this supposed to be some kind of trial run? A test drive? I looked at her and wondered how mortified she must feel. If her father made a habit of sending her around to strangers' homes in the name of matchmaking, that was messed up. If it were me, I'd have invited the guy to dinner, not sent my daughter on a husband-seeking mission. Suddenly, I felt a surge of awkward sympathy for her. The least I could do was try to make her feel comfortable. Maybe we could watch a movie while we eat. What kind of movies do you like? She gave me a dismissive glance. I'm more of a book person, she replied as she began selecting dishes from the upper cabinets. What kind of books? Classics, she said curtly, probably hoping it would shut me up. Like she said, the sooner the meal ended, the sooner she could leave. Still, I turned on the TV and pulled up YouTube, searching for a movie adaptation of a classic novel. I picked one at random and left it playing. A few minutes later, she began serving the food, both the takeout and the dishes she'd cook herself. The spread looked amazing. There were meats, 2 kinds of pasta, a veggie dish, and a bright red soup that smelled incredible. You cook well, I said, honestly impressed. Thank you, she replied simply. We sat and ate while watching the movie. I was surprised and pleased that even after finishing her meal, she stayed to watch until the very end. When she realized how much time had passed, she seemed embarrassed and quickly got up to clear the table. I followed and helped stack the dishwasher. The whole time, she said almost nothing. It was clear she wasn't interested in making conversation. But just before she left, she turned at the door and finally spoke, her eyes flashing with anger. My father thinks I'm stupid. But I'm not. I know I could never respect a man who only wants me because I'm part of his company. So let's stop pretending this isn't a business transaction. Her voice was sharp, but also tired. I came today to show you that I'm not unattractive and that I can cook. If we get married, I expect a house and an allowance that lets me live comfortably. That's all I want. Nothing more from you. I didn't know if I should be angry with her or just feel sorry for her. You should know, I said quietly, your father only made me the offer yesterday after he found out I was planning to leave and start my own company. He wants me to marry you so the business stays in the family. Sure, taking over Rebirth would be easier than starting from scratch. But I'm not going to do that if it means we're both going to live in misery. We stood there in silence for a moment before I added. I was honestly shocked to see you here today. Let's take our time. Let's get to know each other. If it works, great. If not, I'll turn down the offer and build something on my own. The following Saturday, I went for my usual jog. And even though I told myself not to expect anything, I found myself half hoping I'd hear the doorbell ring and find Abigail there again. I missed her. She had a kind of calm, graceful presence, reminded me of my mom in a way. I realized I wouldn't mind having her around. When the doorbell finally rang, I was clean and dressed, but it was just the food delivery guy. I sat down and tried rewatching the movie we'd watched together. It didn't hit the same without her there. Eventually, I called her and asked if she wanted to go for a walk. The following week, the CEO called me and asked when I planned to propose. He said he didn't have long left and wanted to see us married before he passed. There was no need for a long engagement, he added. So that afternoon, I took Abigail out for lunch, and every day that week after that. I got to know her better. She wasn't lazy, the way her father made her out to be. She just didn't care for business. She preferred a quiet life at home and filled her time with cooking, crafting, and other hobbies. She told me she'd been engaged twice before, both times to men outside the corporate world. Her father had shut down both relationships. After that, she'd given up on love altogether. She knew she was just a bargaining chip. Her father had tried to sell her off so many times, she'd stopped believing in romance. But somehow, we liked each other. We registered our marriage about a month after we met, and then we told our parents. I'll let my mother tell the rest of the story.
When Leon told me he'd married Jeremy Tanner's daughter, I was stunned. But when he explained how it had all come about, I was completely shaken. What a wild twist of fate. Not only had my son gone to work for Jeremy, he'd actually married his daughter. It felt like our lives had come full circle, tangled together in a way I could never have imagined. I didn't say a word to anyone. Not because I didn't want to, but because I still hadn't told anyone about my reawakening. Instead, I kept my silence and made quiet preparations. I showed up to the wedding with the rest of my family, smiling politely and keeping my secrets close. The day of the ceremony, I sat with my husband in one of the hotel's private lounges where the guests of honor were waiting. That's when he walked in. An old man shuffled into the room, hunched over, looking like he was pushing 90. He leaned heavily on a cane, with an assistant hovering close behind, steadying him every few steps. His head was down, shoulders slumped, and for a moment I didn't even recognize him. Then he lifted his head, and our eyes met. It was Jeremy. I was shocked. He looked awful. He couldn't have been more than his early 70s, but he looked so much older, worn down, beaten by life. And when he saw me, really saw me, his whole expression changed. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he said, voice trembling. "Hello, Jeremy," I replied coolly, staying seated. No warm greetings, no fake smiles. "Have you met my husband, Mr. Ferry?" I asked, gesturing to the man beside me. "He owns Silk Road Group. You might have heard of it? They just acquired Z Bank Limited." I let the words sink in before continuing, deliberately calm. "And these are my other children, Michael and Louise. They're twins. Louise is married. Her kids are around somewhere. Michael's married too. His wife's with their boys." I turned back to Jeremy, smiling tightly. "And this is my husband, Leon Ferry Sr." I said the name slowly, clearly, savoring the moment, and I watched as realization hit him like a brick. His face went pale. His hands began to shake. "Leon is your son?" he stammered, barely above a whisper. I stood, walked over to him, and leaned in to say quietly, "Actually, he's my adopted son. We adopted him after the twins were born." Jeremy let out a strangled sound. "No, no," he whispered, his face contorted. "I'll call the wedding off. This is the last straw. I thought you were infertile. I never wanted to adopt with you." I smiled, cold and controlled. "And what reason will you give for canceling the wedding?" I asked lightly. "Besides the ceremony today, it's just for show. They're already married. Didn't you know?" His knees buckled. He clutched his chest as he collapsed into a chair. His assistant and a couple of guests rushed over to help. Someone loosened his collar. Someone else grabbed a bottle of water and splashed his face. Eventually he came to, but the fire in him was gone. He just looked at me, hollow-eyed, defeated. The ceremony went ahead without a hitch. My son, my adopted son, married Jeremy Tanner's daughter, and by legal contract became his heir, the son he never wanted with me, the child he refused to adopt in a past life that now seemed like a bad joke. His own biological sons, born of the woman he cheated with, had all but vanished from his life, useless, entitled, estranged. And now, all of Jeremy's wealth, his legacy, his carefully built empire, belonged to my family. Jeremy left the wedding venue and went straight to the hospital. He died a week later, alone, bitter, broken. He refused to see his kids or anyone else from his family. In the end, he had no one, according to the contract he signed with Leon Jr. The assets would only revert to the Tanners if the couple divorce without producing a son. But Leon Jr. and Abigail already have 2 boys, and she is pregnant with their third. They are happy, and from the way Leon looks at her, even now, I had no doubt he will never leave her. The end.